I hail from the quaint town of Maplewood, Pennsylvania, where life was simple and everyone knew each other. My father worked as a mechanic, while my mother managed the only grocery store in town. Despite not having much, we had each other, and that was all that mattered. As a child, I was just like any other, always curious and exploring the woods near our home, occasionally getting into mischief. However, what truly captivated me were the eerie tales spun by the elderly residents of Maplewood, ghost stories of haunted houses and mysterious creatures lurking in the woods. Although I enjoyed listening to these stories, I never truly believed in them. Fast forward to my early 20s, and I found myself at a crossroads, unsure of what path to take in life. With limited job opportunities in Maplewood, I eventually landed a position as a security guard at the historic St. Mary's Hospital in the city. The building, dating back to the early 1900s, exuded an air of mystery and intrigue. The walls seemed to hold untold secrets, and late at night, strange noises would reverberate through the empty corridors. Despite these occurrences, I dismissed them as mere building quirks or the scurrying of rodents. My duties as a security guard were mostly uneventful, consisting of making rounds, checking doors, and ensuring everything was secure. Working the night shift meant solitude in the dimly lit hallways, where shadows seemed to dance and whispers echoed in the silence. Although the atmosphere could be unsettling, I attributed it to the wind or my overactive imagination. However, one fateful night, everything changed. That night was unlike any other, and it marked the beginning of a thrilling and mysterious journey. On a chilly, rainy night, the wind howled and the rain pounded against the windows as if trying to break in. I was on my usual rounds when I heard it, a faint noise coming from the old, deserted east wing of the hospital. This part of the building had been abandoned for years, ever since the patients were moved to a newer section. Initially, I thought it was just the wind, but as I approached, I realized it was something more. The sound of slow, dragging footsteps echoed through the hallway. My heart raced, but I convinced myself it was probably just a homeless person who had found their way inside. I followed the noise, my flashlight barely cutting through the darkness. The air was icy, and a putrid smell lingered. When I turned the corner, I saw her. She stood at the end of the hallway, her back to me, wearing a hospital gown. But something was off. Her legs were twisted backward in an unnatural way. I was frozen in fear, thinking it was a trick of the light until she turned around. Her eyes were pitch black, her smile twisted and eerie. But the most terrifying part was her movement. She didn't walk, she ran towards me with her twisted legs, faster than any human should be able to move. I will never forget that night. The night I encountered something beyond explanation in the deserted wing of the hospital. I didn't hesitate, I just turned and bolted. The sound of her twisted legs slapping against the floor echoed behind me, sending shivers down my spine. It was like the sound of bones breaking with each step she took. The flickering lights above me added to the eerie atmosphere as I sprinted, feeling her icy breath on my neck, urging me to run faster. I resisted the urge to look back, knowing that if I did, it would be game over. I pushed myself harder than ever before, my feet pounding against the tiles as I raced towards the main entrance. My lungs burned, my legs threatened to give out, but I refused to slow down. Just as I reached the doors, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air, sending chills down my spine. I couldn't tell if it was her or me, but it was enough to propel me through the doors and out into the cold night. As soon as I crossed the threshold, everything fell silent. The footsteps ceased, the lights stopped flickering, and the oppressive feeling lifted. Gasping for breath, I looked back at the hospital. She was gone, but I knew she was still lurking in the shadows, biding her time. The next morning, I quit. I couldn't handle it anymore. I packed up and returned to Maplewood, keeping the terrifying experience to myself. Who would believe me, anyway? But her presence still lingers, her eyes watching me from afar, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I avoid the city and hospitals as much as possible now. But sometimes, when the wind howls or when I'm alone at night, I can't help but think about her. About the narrow escape I had that night. I wonder if she's still there, haunting those halls, waiting for her next victim. When I was about 10 years old, I had never laid eyes on a picture of my grandmother. My mother, still haunted by her mother's suicide when she was just 10 years old, couldn't bring herself to have any reminders of her mom around the house, so I never got to see her. I was born 6 years after my grandma took her own life, and I've always been told that I bear a striking resemblance to her and share her exact personality. I found it strange because I had never seen this mysterious woman before, so how could I be like her? But then, one day, everything changed. I vividly remember sitting on my bed, engrossed in a book, when I glanced up for no reason and saw a woman standing in my doorway. I felt no fear, no urge to call for help. I simply looked back down at my book. After a moment, it hit me that I didn't recognize her. The sense of safety I felt looking at her was anything but normal. When I looked up again, she was gone. This unfamiliar woman had vanished from my home. Fear began to creep in, and I cautiously peered down the dark hallway. I mustered up the courage to walk into the hallway, despite my lack of survival instincts as a child. As I entered the kitchen, I noticed the china cabinet was open. This was odd because the cabinet was old, creaky, and difficult to open. If it had been opened during the day, we all would have heard it. Realization dawned on me that something was amiss. I hurried to my mother's room and woke her up to explain what had happened. I struggled to find the right words, but I vividly described the woman I had seen. She was tall, wearing a white lacy wedding dress with pearls around her neck and wrists. Her lips were painted a dark pink, and her hair was bleached. The mysterious encounter left me. This is how I described her, but I also added examples of her features by comparing them to mine, such as my nose and the color of my eyes. I never expected my mom to burst into tears and grab my hand so tightly that I thought she was angry with me. It wasn't until she calmed down that she spoke, word for word. My mother was buried in a white dress. I was confused as to why she brought this up until my mom pulled out a book from the cedar chest in front of her bed and showed me a picture of the woman I had described. It was her. The woman in the picture looked exactly like the woman I had seen in person. It was my grandma. She had the same nose and eyes as me, like looking into a mirror of myself and a copy of the woman I had just seen. Now, I know you may find this hard to believe. Many people do because it's so bizarre. But after this event, I started having dreams of my grandmother speaking to me. I only remember small personal details that I had shared with my mom, details that only she and my grandmother knew. My mom believes that my grandmother and I are connected, and that my grandmother sent me to my mom during a time when she was struggling with suicidal thoughts and a lot of other issues. I don't know if this is paranormal or what, but I only see her when I visit my mother's house. And every time, without fail, the china cabinet is open. Can you believe this? I've had dreams with other deceased family members speaking to me, and I've seen ghosts before, but nothing like this. It's truly incredible. I'm eager to find out if anyone else has experienced something similar. Let me share a bit about my past living situation. I used to reside in a house with my ex-partner who was emotionally and verbally abusive. The atmosphere in the house was always tense, with his outbursts of anger followed by long periods of silence. Most of my friends stopped visiting because of the negative energy in the house. The tension was palpable as soon as you walked in, but I had grown accustomed to it as his wife. My first strange experience occurred in the late 80s Cape Cod house we shared. Everything was great for the first 6 months after we got engaged and moved in. However, things took a turn when my husband started working night shifts. Arguments became more frequent, and he would follow me around the house yelling until I apologized and did whatever he wanted. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to keep him happy by meeting his every demand. He expected me to have meals ready, keep the house spotless, earn money, avoid seeing my friends, let him do as he pleased, leave him alone, never show any negative emotions, and follow a laundry list of other rules. It was exhausting trying to keep up with his demands. The tension in the house only grew as time went on. Can anyone relate to this kind of experience? The first time I saw the shadow figure was a night I will never forget. I was home alone, and my partner was working late. I woke up in the middle of the night to find him on his side of the bed, holding what appeared to be his cell phone. I could see the outline of his shoulder and the glow of the phone screen. I was surprised he was home early, but I didn't want to disturb him, so I pretended to be asleep. After a few minutes of him not moving, I reached for my phone to check the time. It was 3-something in the morning. When I turned back to him and asked if he was okay, he was just standing there, staring at me. His figure was darker than the darkness itself, with only his ears and shoulders visible. My fight or flight response kicked in, and I threw my pillow at him, grabbed my phone, and ran out of the house. There was no intruder, no one in the house, but I couldn't sleep that night. Fast forward a year to our new, luxurious home. My ex had money, and he spared no expense in building us a new, modern house in a residential neighborhood. At first, small things started happening, lights flickering, the TV acting up, but I brushed it off. However, my ex's behavior became increasingly erratic and difficult to understand. The tension between us was palpable, with weeks of silent treatment. One night, at 3 a.m., the fire alarm in our bedroom went off for no reason. Later that week, my girlfriend and I heard footsteps running upstairs when no one was there. With no kids, my dog always by my side, and my ex asleep, these occurrences were unsettling. Lights would flicker, items would move on their own, the TV would turn on in the dead of night, and our house was even struck by lightning, twice. The paranormal activity in our new home was both terrifying and, as my marriage was coming to an end and his abusive behavior was becoming more violent, I once again saw his shadow. We had a fight the week before and he had been giving me the silent treatment ever since. One night, while he was at work, I woke up to the sound of footsteps at the foot of the bed. When I opened my eyes, I saw the same shadow on his side of the bed. The strange thing was that he had short hair in the shadow, even though he had long hair at the time. It was like the shadow of him from our old house. Despite feeling uneasy, I tried to ignore it and go back to sleep. I felt like the darkness wasn't directed at me, but I couldn't say I felt safe either. It was as if the shadow was haunting me, even though he was still alive. Has anyone else experienced being haunted by the living? Let me know your thoughts. 3 weeks ago, my grandpa passed away. Although we never had a strong relationship, in the last year, we started to build a stronger connection, thanks to my girlfriend. Before his passing, he was hospitalized due to a severe heart attack. The first day my girlfriend and I visited him, he was happy to see us but also worried that he wouldn't make it to attend our wedding. The day before his funeral, 2 strange things happened that may have been connected to him or just coincidences. Around noon, my girlfriend, my mother, and I were searching for some documents. I jokingly said, "Grandpa, if you're here, give us a sign and show us where this document is." Suddenly, the TV turned on. Beneath the TV, we found some papers in his journal, which we discovered for the first time that day. All 3 of us were sitting on his bed when this happened, and the remote was on the table across the room. The second eerie incident occurred in the evening. We were in the chapel where my grandpa was being kept until the funeral. Around the coffin were many flowers and funeral wreaths. As everyone gathered around the coffin to pray, the funeral wreath my girlfriend and I had bought started shaking violently. It was the only one moving, among all the others. The movement stopped only when my girlfriend got up to investigate. There was no wind or other explanation for why it was moving. I believe this may have been connected to his fear of missing our wedding. These strange occurrences have left me both amazed and comforted, as if my grandpa was trying to communicate with us from beyond. I had planned to take a shower around 11 p.m., but then I heard some knocking outside the house. At first, I thought it was my partner, but when I texted him, he said he was working the night shift. That's when I noticed something dancing outside the bathroom window. I couldn't take my eyes off of it. My brain tried to rationalize it as trees swaying in front of the street lamps, but then I realized we didn't have any big trees like that in the neighborhood. Everyone keeps their gardens neat with bushes and small plants. It was strange, but kind of cool. I decided to check if the doors were locked and found the back door wide open. I knew my children had closed it and my partner had locked it, so I searched the house to see if anyone had come in. No one was there, but I caught a whiff of faint jasmine incense in the air. I chalked it up to my tired, pregnant brain playing tricks on me. I texted my partner again, and he confirmed he was still at work. I've been seeing figures in my peripheral vision and hearing things, but I've been dismissing it due to exhaustion and pregnancy. Here is the end of this video and you can share your personal experience and incidents that happened with you.